So this is Barbie. I'm Stephen. You guys are you. I was thinking you should all join hands and see if you can find somebody who's awake. We're pretty early, but could have been 8 o'clock, so it could have been worse. So you have your choice this week of this or this. Raise your hand if you'd like these to stay on stage. But these go to the office afterwards, right? And I'm supposed to come on Friday afternoon and pick them up, but I didn't. So this is what they look like a total week later, but you should see our garden. I'll take a picture of it next week. You'll see a picture of the garden. These have been in the garage all week, right? Because the freeze came last Wednesday, right? So we did pretty well. So applause for the dahlias while I'm taking this off stage. Bye. Next week is the Tuesday before Halloween, right? So maybe I'll keep those flowers for a Halloween bouquet. Or possibly these. Okay, so today we're going to start with a little, they say there are no exams and no quizzes, nothing. But I'd like to have one little quiz. And you're just going to raise your hand if you remember. This is to see if you were really listening. And I've learned that people they remember the jokes, but they forget the information. So that's why I keep telling bad jokes, I guess. So how many remember how many coffee beans Beethoven thought made the perfect cup of coffee? So raise your hand if you're pretty sure. Okay, now I'm going to point the laser at somebody. So I don't have a real way. The first hand I saw go up was our friend who's the literary person, right? The literature person. She's usually reading a book while I'm trying to teach. And so if the answer is correct, you win 2 prizes. Okay, so you want to say? 50 coffee beans. So I counted them out. This is a cup of coffee. I mean, that's 50 beans. But if you've been in Europe, how big are the coffee cups? Do you know that little name, the demi-tasse? So I think that was coffee beans were expensive even for Beethoven. So this will be your prize, one of them. 50 coffee beans, and you'll report back next week how it tasted. Actually, it looks like my grandmother's Norwegian coffee for an entire pot, you know. She'd invite people in for coffee. And I decided that it's not proven, but I think that when the pioneers came, they didn't have any money. So they brought a pound of coffee from wherever they came, right? And it had to last 5 years, right? I think something like that. So they drank you couldn't stand a spoon of in my grandma's coffee, I'm tell you that. And because snickering, it seems to be the best I can do for laughter, you get a Snickers bar. All right, so you come up and get those whenever you want. And applause for, what's your name? I'm sorry. Jerry, that's right, you told me last week. So Jerry's quite the winner. So sometime during this hour and a half, which is already hour and 25 minutes, our friend Cheryl, raise your hand, Cheryl, is going to come around and pass around, and you will all get to go home with a little Halloween-sized Snicker bar today. Now, they do make a candy. I think they used to make a candy called Chuckles or something. Or do they still have it? I don't know. So chuckling could be a little step up from Snickers, snickering. And laughter, they don't have a candy bar named Laughter. And they also don't have, as far as I know, it's a good thing, they don't have a candy bar named Smirk. I don't know if it would sell. Were you ever in school when the teacher said, Billy, if I wipe that smirk off your face, are you going to be staying after school for the rest of your life, right? Little behavior training. Okay, so today we're going to talk a little more. I mean, I have to tell you, for the piano, the Romantic period is it, kind of. We play everything, and we love everything, but the Romantic period just grabs our hearts in general, I think. Would that be true?
Yes, because the instrument was fully developed. It's pedal and many more notes up here and down there.
Could you hear Barbie? She said, kind of. So yeah, the piano was fully developed. Our gentleman who always wears orange or red back here, asked a question about how many octaves did Chopin have? So this is great. When you guys ask good questions, I get a thought going. And I was noticing that a piece I'm going to play for you this morning, and we're going to look at it a little bit with the ideas. So Chopin uses at least this note and this note. So that means he had at least that many notes, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 plus several more notes. But he might have even had, by the end of his career in his life, he might have had the full 6 octaves, either from C to C or A to A. So the piano was growing. And so as the piano grew, as the instrument grew, that inspired the composers. As the composers developed, that demanded the piano to get bigger. So the instrument was pretty fully developed. This is the time, and if you read your PowerPoints, I put a lot of information on the PowerPoints that we don't go over because you can hopefully go home and download or look at it on your computer, hopefully. And there's a lot of information in case you're not doing readings, so you can kind of get a Reader's Digest version of some of the thoughts. And the 19th century was the rise of the middle class, right? There were merchants, there were people that had businesses, and they earned money, and they had money to spend, so they could buy a piano. In the Florence Hotel in this town, in the mezzanine, go up the first set of stairs to that kind of balcony, there's an 1880 or 81 piano that was the first grand piano, we're pretty sure, that came to Missoula on a mule train from Fort Benton. It's up there, and it still plays. Barbie played, I think,
December 12th, we're going to play the piano between 5 and 7:30.
between 5 and 7:30 on December 12th. Okay. Yeah, okay. Yeah, great. So that's a playable piano from 1880. So pianos can last a long time. Okay, so the Chopin Ballade in G minor is just a heartful piece. And what I'd like, see, I already forgot your name. Yeah, Nancy Graves. Nancy, may I tell them what you did? Nancy gave up her Tuesday morning bridge to attend this class for 6 weeks only, if her friends will have her back. Anyway, I don't know what you gave up, but Lent is coming, so plan ahead. So we have Christmas first. Okay, so the Chopin Ballade, this is the heart of Romanticism. Just a piece, remember Bach, you might have the same spirit and character and mood and emotion carrying through an entire piece or movement. So that was kind of maintaining character, maintaining emotion. But by the time of Beethoven, everything was changing, and they had contrasting moods happening throughout a piece, throughout a movement. There were changes all the time, and they were purposeful changes to make you excited and propel toward a climax, a peak, all the way to the top of Mount Sentinel and down the other side, and then another climax would happen, and then a very reposed kind of section in the piece might happen. And so by the time of Romanticism, which is, you'll look on your PowerPoints, but everything's sort of a response to what happened before. I was thinking I should bring 2 ties. I've got some ties that are thinner than this and ties that are wider than that. You know how fashion changes? Music and art and literature and everything sort of evolves, but it also is a response to what came before, or a change or a difference, something like that. And then eventually it'll come back. So they say, for example, that Baroque music, which came before Beethoven, the music of Bach, is in a way a romantic time. The architecture was flourishing and lavish and whatever. Classical became much more conservative in a way and very more objective, but still beautiful. Mozart's music is beautiful. Beethoven, Haydn, everything's wonderful, but it's very more restrained. There's a certain restraint. And then Romanticism comes, and the pendulum swings the other way again. So it's romantic for Baroque, kind of, and then more conservative or restrained for classical, and then more emotional again. So this piece is very emotional. You won't have just one emotion. Now, I have to tell you, if you feel like I say, well, don't you feel this note that just tugs at your heart, and you're saying, no, I hear him playing a note, but I don't feel what he's talking about. because it's a language. And so you have to just kind of enjoy for whatever you experience. You don't have to feel like, oh, Chopin is crying in that note or something like that. But it's useful to at least know that it's there. And I remember when I was a little guy on the farm and we got our first and only forever television set, black and white, RCA. And Leonard Bernstein was doing a young people's concert. Wow, that was a great thing. Stephen, you've got to watch a young people's concert. You'll learn something. And so I didn't think about the fact that the speaker was this size, right, in the television or something. And so Leonard Bernstein has the New York Philharmonic play it like very boringly, and I'm going, wow, that sounds great. And he says, now can you tell that that just is without any emotion at all? And then they'd play the same passage with all this emotion, and he'd say, you see and hear how much better that is? And I'm going, no, maybe I better take a Molly class. But they didn't have them for pre-retired little punks like me. So anyway, so don't feel badly if you don't know what a C major scale is or why you would do E flat major instead of D major or whatever, because it's like a thing that you experience in your own way. So this is the Chopin G minor ballade. I want to play it, but I want to think, you will think and feel as you go, just some of the shifting emotions. Maybe you'll have an overall feeling about the piece, dramatic or boring or whatever. And at the end, I'd like to get some responses, and then we'll look into a little bit of things, some few things. So this is, I think I might have to shut this one off when I play. And it's about 10-minute piece, so get out your bridge deck, and you could have a round or a hand. Okay, so I'll shut this off. And you're going to hear, I can tell you at the beginning, you're not going to yet be in the key of the piece. And this is purposeful, and we'll look at it afterwards. But you won't know that. You'll just hear this single note, and you'll say, I wonder where that's going. And that's what you should be wondering always. Where is the music taking me? Where is the music going? And this is a ballade. You see it up there. I would point to it, but I think you can see it. Where did my clicker go? And so the ballade, if it's a poem, it's epic, right? It's a big story. Beowulf, maybe, is a ballad or something. Or the Ballad of Baby Doe, a story of the person that survived the Titanic and went back to the gold mines of Colorado. So big story. So this is a big story piece. And it's a journey. It's not meant to just be, oh, how pretty. It's kind of a, what are you hearing? Why is it repeating that theme? What is it doing with that theme? Why is that theme coming back in a new triumphant key or something like that? So the first notes of the piece do not start in the key of the piece. The key is G minor. You see that right there, it says G minor. We haven't talked about what does OP mean. Oops, there we are. But OP is abbreviation for opus, and opus is Latin for work, so it's Chopin's 23rd published work. So you go to the publisher, might even be a different publisher. Well, what opus number have you completed? Well, I just finished opus 23. Well, then our next work will be opus 24. Now, opus 28 of Chopin is 24 pieces, the 24 preludes. So it doesn't have to be just one piece, but it is his 24th publication. So, okay, so it doesn't start in the key, and what does that have to do with romance? Well, yearning, I mentioned to you, yearning is like, I want, I need, I aspire, I desire, I covet something more. And so yearning is a normal feeling in life. Sometimes we even say in the Romantic period, is yearning for something you can't even have, so it's really out there, yearning for the unattainable, but just yearning. So by not giving us G minor right away, Chopin is saying, I'm not quite going to tell you yet that it's going to be in G minor. And that, in a way, after you know that, you feel the yearning in those notes. And then finally, in measure whatever, 12 or something, we'll take a look later, you'll get the feeling that, oh, well, now we're in the key. I can feel that we settled someplace. So we chose this bouquet instead of the other one. When you saw that other one, you're probably yearning for this one already. So this is the G minor ballade, great piece, takes your heart, and at the end, just raise your hand if you have some response. I'll shut off the speaker here, or the mic. I'm afraid I'm going to wrap up in this. Be like Halloween, wires everywhere. So that's an adventure, right? I mean, you just can't even know what's coming next, but it takes you to whatever's next. So that's the epic, that's the ballade, that's the story. And it's an emotional journey, and it's a musical journey, maybe even a spiritual journey of sorts, because music touches our souls and comes. And as Jeffrey Beagle said to all of us in the master class, he said, the composer creates the work, and then usually they can't be with us today. And so 100 years ago, and 200 almost, when Chopin was born, right? Well, 1920, 2010, 1910, 1810, that's a long time ago. So we performers love the music, so we just can't get enough of it, and therefore we practice until it gets better and better, and then we recreate the work. Now we have CDs, and we have MP3s, and we have radio, and we have everything. We have kids that don't know how to talk to each other. They're standing by the bus stop, and they're texting their new buddy, and they're standing over here texting right back. And, oh, that's you. All these years we've been pen pals. Okay, so some feedback, some thoughts, some feelings. Yeah. No, please. Oh, a microphone. Do we have a mic for folks? Yes, we do right here. Thank you. Yeah, the rules are no fair talking.
I thought overall the piece was very dramatic. And then at the beginning it reminded me of a mystery, and then it kind of went into a lament. And to me, and then it would go lighter, and then it would go darker. But overall, just very dramatic.
Dramatic's a good word. It very much is. What else? Any? Those? Yeah.
Stephen, could you put the piece in context? How old was Chopin? Who did he write this for? Was it part of a series?
Yeah, this piece was very important in his life. He started writing it in Vienna, Austria. He went from Poland to Vienna. He had a couple concert tours. And when he was in Vienna the second time, he realized that he was not German and he was not understanding their language. His father was French, therefore his name was Chopin. And his father taught French to Polish kids in a school near Warsaw. And so French was his native tongue as well as Polish. And so here he is in Vienna in 1829, 1830, and he thinks, I just don't see myself staying here. So and this is important because it's part of the context. So what happens? Could be politically, history repeats itself. So Russia decided to dominate Poland yet once again, and he could never go back to Poland. He was in Vienna. So that Poland was off limits. So maybe this piece reflects that, because he started writing it there, 1831-ish, and then he moved to Paris because he spoke French, and there was a whole, they call it expatriates from Poland. There was a whole enclave of Polish expatriates in France, in Paris, and so that became his life home, 1831, and when he settled there, of course, French was perfect for him. He fit right in. But he also realized he wasn't going to be a concert pianist. He was like, I think Marjorie shared with you a week or so ago that he was terrified of audiences. You guys aren't very terrifying, but just the idea, I'm supposed to play every note perfectly, and generally you don't get every note. There's a whole bunch of notes. But so he felt very comfortable in Paris. But he finished the piece there, and he was a master composer. Now, he's only 25 years old in 1835, 1836, when this piece was completed. But this is the first of 4 ballads or ballades. I actually played all 4 of them on a recital here years ago, and it was a very fun project, because here's the first one we talked about a little bit, and then here's the second one, here's the third, and here's the fourth. And the fourth, in fact, does show something of a more mature and even greater composer. And we've been talking about how when composers are adept with their harmonies and their writing skills and even their penmanship, so the publishers can read it and get it right, they are in command of their language. And so they can write very efficiently, effectively, and just from their soul, something that a freshman in theory here would not write this piece. Does that make sense? It's very mature. but he matured early. Thank heavens. You know, there's a saying, Mozart doesn't fit in this category, and Chopin doesn't fit, and Mendelssohn doesn't fit in this category, because the saying is, in the world of literature and whatnot, or poetry, a poet finds his or her voice at the age of 40. Well, if you had to wait till 40, Chopin was dead, and Mozart was dead, and you see what I'm saying? So there are exceptions where there are geniuses who just develop very, very early. Does that kind of answer your thought? Yeah, other thoughts? Yes.
Well, first of all, I am exhausted listening to you, so I don't know how you feel, but it was such a wonderful, wonderful, thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
It was just beautiful. I am currently going through a really hard time in my life, and what I don't want your, I'll take your sympathy.
Yeah, sure.
But what I want to say is that the emotion in that really took me. It's so emotional. It's so powerful, whether it's spiritual or whether that ties in with emotional. But what I loved is that it's like you're going really deep down into emotions, and then it's like, okay, enough. Let's play a nice, soft, the same rhythms, same refrains, but gentler,
Repose.
softer.
Yeah,
So we can
repose.
just stop being so emotional and overwrought, and let's just. So I love the way it went back and forth.
There's
like
even
that.
a little humorous section, if I can start kind of in the middle, which goes something like that, and it's playful. And Chopin knew how to be playful as well as serious. Yeah.
Adding on to what she said, and I don't have the music vocabulary, but there was the section that was like playful, laughing, kind of frenetic, and then I thought, okay, and then kind of a little bit later fell into this nice da-da-da-da, all is well, perhaps dance version of the one that was before. And I thought, oh, good. So just...
Just to share with you what you're thinking, the opening theme is, somebody said, dark or sort of lamenting or something, but then it becomes triumphant later, and it goes from a minor key into a major key, and it goes into a different key that's very joyous. And you don't have to know that, and you can say, like my 3-inch speaker on the RCA television, I don't hear anything, but what you hear is good. It doesn't have to be that. But is that kind of what you're thinking, that it became maybe triumphant or maybe joyous? Yeah. Yeah. Here we go.
I think that when you were talking about how he did not feel at home in Vienna, and then he went to Paris, and I think that's reflected at the end when you talk about he feels triumphant. He's finally found his home. And of course, George Sound.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
His literary and friend and undefined mistress, right? We don't know all of that, but he was for some period of time. In fact, our financial advisor here in Missoula, he and his wife just biked all over the island of Mallorca off the coast of Spain in the Mediterranean. And I said, well, while you're there, if you get a chance, see if you can find the castle where Chopin wrote the 24 Preludes, Opus 28, that one winter. Yeah, and he was his mistress, his friend. Women couldn't use their names in general as an author, so Aurora Dudevant was George Sand. George Sand, and that author wrote a lot of books, very popular author in the 19th century. And she had either owned the castle or had access to it all winter, so they went there. And it's somehow said, and that's like 1832, 3, somewhere in there, where Chopin actually got quite ill, which settled in to become tuberculosis. So maybe it started. Who heated castles back then, right? The walls are this thick, and it would take like all the firewood on the whole island of Mallorca to heat that castle. So they just heated a little area to go warm up and then go back to the piano. And it was raining, and it was dreary, and George Sand came back in and said Chopin was just in a trance, and he was supposedly writing what became, and we're not even sure which piece it is, the Raindrop Prelude. And so Chopin's sitting there in this dank castle writing, and this is about the same time as this ballade, and he's... And then this note is the raindrop, and then it becomes the here comes the rainstorm. And it develops into a big storm, and so if that's true, it can be just, what's the word, apocryphal or legendary, urban myth, whatever you want to think. But it's an interesting story because music is a journey, and it's an emotional journey, as well as a technical, physical, harmonic, rhythmic, triumphant journey. Okay, any other thoughts? Yeah, please.
Can you talk a little bit about how you go about memorizing such an enormous piece of music, and then how you remember it while you're playing it? Are you thinking about how chords are changing, or how does it work?
Yeah, that's a very good question, because there are lectures about memory, and if you go to them, you'll never remember another thing in your life. So many aspects. But there's tactile memory, physical, how it feels under your fingers. There's visual memory, how the score looked, how the piano looks, where the next note is, kind of just visual things. If you have sight, I taught a blind student who had a different way of seeing. There's oral memory, remembering what is and just hearing it, and pre-hearing it is the best way to say it. If you don't hear ahead, you'll get yourself on a detour and say, well, where do I go now? So you try to, just like you're driving at night, you have headlights, and if you look not far enough, you'll miss the deer that's just beyond the fade of the light. You better be looking ahead, but if you don't look close, you'll hit the pothole and the tire will fall off, or the wheel. So you're ebboning and flowing in the line of vision. So you try to stay in the moment. If you're in the moment, then what's coming next will have a better chance of coming to you, because you're on the journey, you're on the road, you know the path, you know the potholes, and you know the deer in the headlights up there, and you're trying to stay with it. But memorizing is an interesting thing. We all have our own little ways. I said visual, oral, tactical, and analytical. If I know the harmony at the beginning is a Neapolitan sixth, you will say, well, what's that mean? But I know what it means, and so that tells me emotional, something emotionally. And so the emotional memory is the one that's not very much talked about. But if you are in the emotions of the piece, you are in the moment, and you are expressing those emotions. So when I start the piece, I know that normally, I'm going to tell you these, I'll leave this microphone on now, but that's a very common chord progression, and it's in key of G minor. This chord is minor, and the first chord is minor, and then the one in between pulls you back to the home key. Now, Chopin, he could have written, but he doesn't use this chord. He changes just one note to this. So this is ordinary, and this is extraordinary. So then you get into a topic of harmonic coloration, harmonic color. Harmony has its own context. You used the word, I believe, and meaning. And so that has more of a lament, the word was used. So and that's an A flat major chord. Now, you know that I like humor. And in the course of this hour, Cheryl's going to pass around the little blue sack, and you each get a little Snicker to take home. And I don't have a chuckle, and you don't get to smirk, but you could just send it around. It's just for fun. It's Happy Halloween in advance. And anyway, why am I telling you that? So this harmony, this harmonic coloration is just rich. And so that's Chopin knowing that. And so instead of giving you C minor, he gives you that one different note. So he gives you A flat major instead of C minor, and it's going to take us to G minor with a little bit of a detour and some harmonic coloration. So A flat major is also the punchline to a joke. That's why I thought of it. So the joke is, very quickly, what happens when a military officer falls down a mine? What do you get when a military officer falls down the mine shaft? A flat major. Well, actually, that's the joke. What do you get when a miner falls down the mine shaft? A flat minor. So it's, hopefully nobody falls down the mine shaft. Anyway, so that's a bad fifth grade joke, so you can snicker a little. So anything else on that? I want to show you a few things. Anything else? Yeah? Are we okay? Oh, yes, please.
I'd like to know if Chopin, all of his ballads were like this.
If he what?
All of his writing music was like this. Was it very strong and dramatic?
It could be anything.
Okay.
And that's part of the romantic thing. They could follow their own emotional thought at the moment. So I played for you, and it's a good question. Last week, I think, or the week before, I played this beautiful. And that's the Aeolian harp etude. Etude is a word that just means study. Like French, they say, je suis étudiant. I am a student. Étudiant is male. Je suis étudiant is a girl, female student. So etude is a study. So the Aeolian harp, I showed you how the harp, the wind could play the harp, right? And then somebody thought, well, that piece sounds like the wind is playing those notes, because it's sort of breezy, floating, and the wind comes and goes, and the breeze comes and goes. And Chopin didn't call it the Aeolian harp, but somebody had that response. Yes, that kind of, so that's very different from this, a darker, dramatic mood. That was the joy of romance, you know, that it could go, just like romances can go anywhere. They can even go south. So not every relationship, I'm dating so-and-so, well, let's see where it goes, you know, and well, let's just be friends. Okay, so let's just take a moment. Barbie's going to play for you some beautiful pieces by Chopin's colleague in Paris, Franz Liszt. And so we'll get to that very shortly. But I first want to go through just a few things, and then you can look through this at home. Where's my clicker? But you won't necessarily, and here's just information that you'll, oh. It's asleep? Oh, thank you. Are you guys asleep too? The computer went to sleep. Well. Oh.
There you go.
Okay. Here we go. I'm not getting much of a response. You know why? Maybe this is under the thingy. There. That's, my little transmitter slipped under this little green coverlet. Okay, here we are. So you'll look at this at home. Some of you were in the class last year where we brought in Rachmaninoff's cousin's hands, and they were enormous. Look how slender Chopin's fingers were. That's his left hand and his right hand. So one is a bronze and one is a plaster cast. And this painting, Delacroix was a very famous French painter, and he was part of this entourage of French patriots and expatriates and French people in Paris, and they were all kind of the artistic crew or enclave, and he painted this picture or painting of Chopin. I'm still having trouble. We thought we had all of our things. So this is the full painting, and this is Georges Sand, his author, friend, and compatriot and mistress for some period of time. And this is what I want to go into a little bit with you. And there's several pages, and we won't go through all of them. But I want you to get the feeling, and I'll just point out a few things by ear. I won't even show them on the score necessarily. But the first 4 notes of the blue on the right, Barbie's going to point with her pointer. And that's the one above the arrows there. So the first note is so Naples, Italy, is south of Rome, right on the west coast. And some of you have been there. Raise your hand. I haven't been to Naples. Okay, well, I'll happily go, Gary, and I'll go with you next. Gary's been there, right? So Naples is where this harmony sort of got. Why not do this? So it sort of centered in Naples, and some smart composers there discovered that if you change one note of that chord to that, you get a different feeling. But it also works. So that's the Neapolitan, it says up there, because that's from Naples. Yearning. And here Barbie was talking about it last week also, and then that. And so this, at the end of the first line, Barbie, that's the yearning, the seufzer I mentioned, sighing, sadness, or weeping, or wanting, or yearning. So there's the yearning. And here it comes in the next line. But he goes below, and then above, and then, so then now if I go back to the E flat, at the beginning of that measure, and in between he goes, and then he goes at, so if you go from the first, and then, next line, G, A. So all those notes come down the scale. That's the genius, right? Not every composer could take that part of, just what can I do with this? So and Barbie knows where I am in the music. And right, if I back up to the C minor chord there, and that's the one where he changed at the beginning. He avoided that note, and he made it that, and that's different. And so he's introducing yearning into the music by harmonic mystery, kind of. And you don't have to know any of that, so don't worry about it. But it's kind of fun to know it's there. And so, and he could have gone like this, but he did this. And that's sort of like, oh, please let us have G minor. No, not yet. The E flat is not in that chord, and that's in the alto voice. Barbie will point to that note. Barbie, you have very nice steady hands. You're hired, okay? And then, now this little theme. And that's a classic example of phrasing. The first phrase is a little different from the second. They're similar but different. So one asks a question and the other one gives the answer. So backing up to the moderato place, that's it, question. would you like to come with me? Shall we dance? And then the other person says, well, maybe if you ask me nicely, you asked me nicely, so yeah, let's give it a go. So, but then somebody else just said, wait a minute, I thought you were going to ask me. And maybe I'll come back and we'll have the next dance. It's kind of questioning. Now, what's important about this little theme, it sounds like a brand new idea, but if you go to the very first measure of the piece, something like that, those 4 notes are ascending up the beginning, Barbie. Yeah. So he takes the same idea, da 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 da, and it goes higher, but it's the same idea. And those are sort of precursors, maybe, to this. And then at the moderato, finally we're in G minor. The answer, the response, call and respond. So the composer sometimes elaborates, thus we have the word, it's more elaborate, right? To elaborate on an idea is to give it a little different swing and different spin. Now here comes a surprise harmony. You don't have to know about it, but maybe you can feel that it's a little different. Or I make it feel different, so you will feel it. If I just go through it. It's like the children on the playground, and some are playing jump rope, and some are bouncing the ball against the side of the building. No, it's not that at all. So the first one, okay, now where you were down at the bottom. Right here is a surprise harmony. So that surprise harmony is like ushering, if you're a tour guide and you're taking everybody through the cave and hopefully nobody fell off the slippery rock and down into the big deep hole, but you're taking them on a cave and everybody's following you. Now watch your step. Okay, now we're going into the room with the stalactites, and of course it's all lit up with lights and you can see it and enjoy it. And maybe, where did we go? In caverns down in New Mexico, yeah. And it's just one big football field full of trails for us to walk, but to see all these things. So in a way, this is like that, and you have stalagmites and stalactites. And this little is the tour guide saying, well, this is going to take us into a different room. And right there, I wrote suspension. And that's part of the beauty of yearning in music, because if I go from there, I'm up the second page top. He could have just gone here, because that's where it's going in the second system. So, but he doesn't. He retains the melody note. And so you say, I'm in Missoula. You wouldn't, I'm in Missoula. I'm in Missoula. You want to sing it, we're in Missoula. You can sing. So the middle syllable, da da Missoula, is a longer note. It's retaining that previous note. It's called suspension, because you're suspending the note that isn't yet resolved. And then he does it on a different harmony. Here's the next suspension. So it's called suspension, resolution, or tension resolution. You have a little argument with your neighbor and your friend, and they say, well, okay, let's just agree to keep loving each other anyway, and that's resolved. So and this is the C sharp. You don't know it's the C sharp, but if you could come up here, you'd look at it and say it. Yes, that's the C sharp. So in the left hand, where it says Seufzer, Seufzer means sighing in German. So those are the tugging at your heart kind of lamenting kind of things. Isn't it interesting, even if you don't have music theory? You know more than the freshmen in music theory, because they don't get that till first semester of second year of theory. You know, they have to do whatever you're asking me about. This class isn't meant to, here's middle C, and now we're going to build all these chords. But you get an appreciation at least. This is called a music appreciation, or my parents used to say music depreciation. I'm not sure I understand it. My grandmother used to say, Stephen, I don't get any of what you're doing, but I sure love watching your fingers fly. So you can enjoy it that way, if not other ways. Okay, then you have Seufzer. This is really the thing, and then we'll go on to Barbie's piece S. So I played this. This is elaborate. And that's a delayed resolution. Here's the Seufzer, Seufzer. And now he sets you up. This is Seufzer, Seufzer. And the da-dum, ba-dum, ba-dum, ba-dum. Those are sighing, sighing. If you're in a grocery store, maybe it's buying, should I buy this or that, buying, trying, all these things, two-syllable words, first syllable accented, but it's sighing. And then the right hand, he could have gone. And he could have resolved the right hand at the same time the left hand resolves, but he doesn't. It's so intricate and so wonderful. So in the right hand, the little note that I made purple, and then purple, color purple. Color purple, color purple. So those are also not in the harmony, so they're the tug at your heart notes. So it's like a conversation, you're getting ready to go out for the evening, and he says, come dear, come dear, come dear. And she says, I'm not ready, I'm not ready. And you put all that together and you get this, it's all happening at the same, but the car is running and we're going to be late, but I won't look beautiful. You look lovely. So at the moment the left hand resolves, the right hand doesn't. Isn't that interesting? And so you can say, are you doing this through a 3-inch speaker? I don't get it. But if you get a feeling for it, it's just the most wonderful thing. And so when you go to the next symphony concert or string orchestra concert, or Barbie and I will play something hopefully in the course of the year, or Marjorie's recital, she told me just now, you can write it down March 7th, 8th, 9th, March 9th. Sunday afternoon at 3 o'clock, March 9th. And Jeffrey Shumway coming up a week from this Friday evening. Come, you can buy your tickets at the door. okay? Or you can buy them in advance. I'm not sure how it's set up. Grizz Ticks, I believe. So you get the idea of this. It's deep, but it's not impossible to appreciate. And if you don't feel it yet, gradually I came to know what Leonard Bernstein meant when he said, "Don't you guys hear how much better this is?" I say, "Well, it sounds pretty good to me either way." So that's good too. Does that make sense? Any more thoughts? Yeah, please. The microphone maybe. So the roving mic, we should have did anybody go to Pink, the concert Pink here? Yay! So there she was on the wires, and she could zoom to this part with on the aerial, right? And the wires were in, so we could have she could have had a microphone for the audience responses. And you want to say something? Okay, please. Yeah.
I'm not sure I can put it into words.
Chopin put it into notes.
Yes.
You can write a
that's the
piece.
thing. So with a painting, with something, I was an art teacher, you have clues. You know, it's all in blues. You know, Picasso, he slumped down. Okay, we're sad. We have clues. Now, I'm listening to from a major to a minor, and it can bring tears. Why? The brain is, with no visual clues, no clues, why is the human brain, or is it cultural, just going from a sound directly to an emotion?
Yeah, isn't that amazing? It's.
Oh, that's a question.
Yeah, I get it. It's also, but it's also an observation. I want to make sure we have time for Barbie. Yes, we're good. So we're going to move on quickly and soon, but please, it's so great that you're feeling that, because that is, like, I was thinking about it last night. When we go to a play, we have words, and if it's in our language, then they say, I'm just not too sure. I don't know where this is going. A couple talking at the restaurant table or something, and pretty soon you're just crying, but you're crying because you hear the words, and this is without words, right? But it's the same thing, somehow. And paintings evoke or emit emotions in a way. You know, you look at a painting and it just makes your heart go. So yes, you're right. It's a wordless transmission of emotion. It can be with song too. I mean, I just saw Katie, who is teaching voice here, and she graduated from here, and I still remember her end of her sophomore year performance. It just moved me to tears. It was so beautiful. But you can also tell if the performer is into the emotion. So if I just did this, sort of, then I'm giving it a different character. So we're trying to find Chopin's characters. That makes sense to you? So I go. Where it's going, and it goes, but at first it's tentative, or it's eking or seeking, yearning. It's in there, and if I feel it, you have a chance of feeling it. If I don't feel it, you'll just notice my fingers flying. Kind of. Is that true, do you think? That we as performers are trying to emit or evoke or transmit the true character of the piece. And it's an interpretation, you know, we're translating, kind of. We're getting out of it what we can. We're going to move on to Barbie. So anybody else first, quick? Let's move on. So we get through these two great pieces by Franz Liszt and Chopin. Were in France at the same time, in Paris at the same time. Franz Liszt, born outside of Vienna, and Hungarian extraction, but he didn't really speak Hungarian. He knew a little bit, but treasured that heritage later. Great composer, incredible pianist. Chopin was not a showman on the stage. Liszt invented showmanship. The piano used to turn this way, and then you'd see the keyboard, and the performer was performing, and Liszt figured out, well, I think they'd like to see my really pronounced, beautiful silhouette nose, or something. He's a very handsome dude, and the piano worked better for the sound to get out, right, this way. So, and the recital came about from Liszt. He started recitaling all over Europe, and he made a ton of money. And later he contributed. He was lavish with benevolence, and he could afford to be. Chopin, they were friends. They admired each other. greatly. So Barbie's going to play, and I'm going to turn pages, and tell us what you'd like a little bit.
Oh, it's on? Can you hear me? Is this on?
If you hold it close, yeah.
Chopin got tuberculosis and died young. Liszt, on the other hand, was a healthy man. He lived to be old, and the two pieces I'm playing were written in 1860 or 62. And Liszt, up until that time, had become a very, very successful concert pianist. He was the first pianist to give whole recitals, and he not only memorized music that he wrote himself, of course. He played whole symphonies, whole operas. He committed to memory all of the great works by any composer who people knew, because they didn't have recordings then, they didn't have TV or radio. And so he brought to the people, to the general public, all the great works that had been written to that time, because he could play them all with fantastic technique. He played them by ear, he arranged them himself. He was just phenomenal. He was like the Elvis Presley of his day. And women loved him. They would throw things at him, and he loved the women too. He was a very affable and very, very easygoing, easy to get along with man. But then, later in his life, he became religious, basically. He didn't like performing anymore, and he even became a priest, or he was wearing the clothes of a priest, and he became sort of more contemplative. He didn't write music that was as technical in difficulty. Now these two pieces, these concert etudes, Forest Murmurs and Dance of the Gnomes, written in 1860, were at a period in his life where he was withdrawing from the public person that he was, playing concerts all over the place, trying to fend off admirers. It was tiresome for him to keep fending off admirers. And so I think that the Forest Murmurs is him listening. He's listening to the world. He's listening to the people and everything that's going on around him. Dance of the Gnomes is people moving around really fast. Instead of gnomes, it's actually people who are doing all kinds of wonderful and terrible things at the same time in the world. So I think it's his reaction to the world at large as the harmonies become more modern. Now, we already demonstrated the sound of two notes next to each other, like those were the notes Mendelssohn used. Now, in Forest Murmurs, he uses these two. I forget, what are the first two notes? Okay, this is Forest Murmurs. The melody and the chord that goes with that is so you hear a little discord in that harmony. And then in Dance of the Gnomes, the first two notes are this. And he treats it as a grace note. A grace note is when you play two notes really fast, one before the other. So that's the actual melody of Dance of the Gnomes. So you hear the modern harmony also with that, with two notes next to each other.
You hear the impishness of the gnomes.
Yeah, so it's the impishness.
The little imps.
And it's the sort of impressionistic music is sort of like it slurs everything together. You start to hear the slurring together of things. And Forest Murmur is the slurring together of everything he's hearing when he's listening out in the world and getting his own inspiration. And then the Forest Murmurs is, what in the world is going on? What is everybody doing out there? I mean, it's just chaos, really. Okay, so here is Concert Etudes, Voices of the Woods, and also called Forest Murmurs, and Gnomenreigen, Dance of the Gnomes.
I think Barbie could maybe consider dressing up as a gnome for Halloween. She could portray the impishness. Oh, you could do the gnome for Halloween. Yeah. Yep.
I scotch taped the music. It's so old. It doesn't stay open.
Okay.
My music wears out, it just falls apart eventually.
Maybe this was Liszt's original score. His music.
They were written right next to each other, so they're side by side. So you've heard all this stuff going on, but you don't know what it is. So now you're starting to pay attention to what it is, and it's all this stuff moving around, and it's people moving around, and you don't know what's happening.
And these pieces are sort of contrasting on purpose, so this will be a very different character.
Yeah, those are probably two of the greatest composers of romantic piano music that ever lived. Chopin wrote almost nothing for any other instrument. He wrote everything for the piano. Liszt was the great arranger. He could arrange books and books of Schubert songs, whole operas, symphonies. He could play everything and anything, and he did. He had a huge concert career, but he also composed a lot of music, even which has yet to this day to be performed. Later in his life, he wrote a lot of choral music, which I don't even think is performed yet. People probably will still discover it. if you go to the library, in the Mansfield Library, I was looking up Liszt's works from his later period, and he wrote simple pieces like called Clouds, like this sort of impressionistic, and very, very manageable. They're not really that hard. So if you want to investigate Liszt, start looking at his later works for chorus or for piano, because they're not as hard. And it's really, really fascinating, the differences between the two greatest pianists who ever lived, probably.
So we have about 8 minutes, and we've been doing more back and forth this week, and next week we'll continue into Impressionistic music, which is in France, and you'll get a feeling for why we call it Impressionism, and that's somewhat on your slides. Do you have questions for Barbie? Any of you that would like to ask something of that? Yeah? So Barbie, you can talk into my microphone. Oops, sorry guys.
I seem to be the only one with a microphone. That's no good at all. What are you going to do? Oh, okay. I can't help but notice a difference between your hands and the plaster casts of Chopin.
I know it. I was noticing that myself. My hands are sort of short and fat, and I can reach a ninth. I can play a ninth. I can barely reach a tenth. But you have big hands like Chopin's. He probably could reach a 12th easily. Once I had the opportunity to meet Van Cliburn in New York after some concert or something, and I was actually able to put my hand against his, and his hand was so huge. I think he could reach a 12th or...
Texas hands.
Yeah, absolutely enormous hands. But like one of my teachers told me, he said, well, the advantage of having the small fingers is when you have the notes really fast, close together on piano, you can get your fingers in between the notes easily and you can play them easier. So in a way, that is an advantage because my fingers fit in between the keys. Some pianists, like one of my teachers was Rudolf Serkin, he had really fat fingers. I mean, it was hard for him to even fit his hands in between the keys sometimes. So, the shape of your hand is key to your comfort zone. And I always tell people, and I know good piano teachers do too, they always tell their students, find what's comfortable for your hand because everybody's hands are different and no two people have the same hand. But it's important, if something hurts, stop. Don't play if your hand hurts. And I know some musicians like Robert Schumann, he practiced so hard that he ruined his hands. He couldn't play very well after that. So you've got to be very careful if it hurts, stop, rest. But find your comfort zone. Something that's comfortable for you won't be what's comfortable for somebody else. So that's the key, I think.
Okay, anything? Yeah, go ahead.
One quick question about process. I'm a musician and I write a lot of music. And when I look at all of this and I think about the amount of notes and the amount to write a 10-minute piece and get all that written down, they must have evolved some quick technique with all this blank paper. And watching you play at that velocity and write it down correctly. I mean, I cheat because I just record everything and then I go back and write it down and correct it. But the process is amazing. Did they have assistants or?
They did have assistants from their students. And I know that when Mozart was dying, he was writing the Mozart Requiem. And he didn't finish it, I don't think. So one of his students had to finish it after he died. But they did use students. And in fact, there are stories of half-written concertos where the Mozart or Beethoven would go to play it, and people, the other musicians would notice, oh, the piano part isn't there. What is he playing? He didn't even write it down. And so they would write down the notes for the orchestras because the orchestra would have to read the music, but then there wouldn't be anything on the page for the rest of the piece. So You really, that's a really important point. I mean, how composers can actually write the music. Nowadays, there's a lot of technology help with computer programs, but still, computers make mistakes. They make ridiculous mistakes. So when you get a printout of an accompanying piece, I do a lot of accompanying around here, and you see, oh, that's absolutely ridiculous. One thing that I just noticed in this difficult piece, I can't play it. I'm going to accompany a saxophone player next week, and the score is just impossible. But I noticed it has like left hand for this part right up here, and you know, you have a right hand. Why can't you play that with a right hand? There's stupid mistakes. And I'm even wondering now, as I'm looking at this score, this particular score, I'm wondering if artificial intelligence has written some music, because I'm getting in my accompaniment scores things that are so ridiculous. I think, how could a composer really write this? It's, first of all, not playable, and second of all, it makes absolutely no sense. So I have a lot of questions when I'm learning music. Learning music is hard, and I struggle with accompanying a saxophone concerto this week. Wish me luck, say prayers, because it's a very difficult piece. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, anyone else? Yeah, here in the front.
When I studied speech in college, one of the things I learned was that you had to know the author's history because it was reflected in their work. And I never did take a music appreciation course, but I think I'm learning from you that you need to know the composer's background to understand how their emotion is reflected in their music.
I was commenting about that. That is really true, and I'm always amazed at how much I don't know, and I'm learning a lot from Steve. He brings up these words that, you know, I never learned in school, so I'm glad I can have Steve to teach them to me. But what was I going to say? Oh, I forget what I was going to say. I'm sorry.
We can learn words and forget them.
I was going to say something really important.
You were talking about something that might rejar her memory.
What was your question again? Or maybe it was just...
It was more of a comment in knowing that you need to know,
Oh, I know what I wanted to say.
the composer's
Yeah,
background.
a really good place to look is letters that the composers wrote. There's a book of Schubert's letters that's really, really short. Schubert was only 31 when he died, and he never had any money, and he never even owned a piano. And the first letter is writing to his brother to ask for food. I mean, he was a teenager at the time. And the last letter in the book of Schubert's letters was, again, writing to his brother, asking for more books by James Fenimore Cooper, who was writing... He was writing books in the United States, up in Westchester, New York. And Schubert had already read everything that James Fenimore Cooper had written, and he was writing books in English, and Schubert was in Vienna, so how did they get James Fenimore Cooper books from Westchester, New York to Vienna, and Schubert was reading them, and he died in 1828. That was amazing to me. Now, if you look by contrast at Beethoven's letters, for instance, it's fascinating. You can turn to any page in the book and you'll find an interesting letter. One letter, which was an account, it wasn't written by Beethoven, but it was about Liszt, played for Beethoven when he was 12 years old. And Beethoven was already deaf. And so Liszt went in, his teacher was Czerny, who took him to play for Beethoven. And Beethoven, Beethoven asked him to play a prelude and fugue by Bach. So he did. He picked the C minor one. You can go play it, Steve, on the piano. Show him which one it is. It's the, okay. But in any case, so then when he finished, Beethoven said, "Now can you please transpose it to a different key?" So he had to play the same thing over again in a total different key. It was really interesting. And the end result was that Beethoven ruffled his hair and said, "You're going to make many people very happy someday." And that's what Liszt did. He said it was the most important thing that ever happened to him as he was growing up, was playing for Beethoven.
Right, I think Michelle's giving us that look. It's time for you guys to transpose yourselves to your parking or to another class.
Let us thank Stephen and Barbie for a fantastic class. Thank you so much. And we'll see everybody next week.
So look at your PowerPoint. It's got some information for next week at the end.